here at AWS. I'm joined by one of my co-hosts, Nathan Peck, another DA, and we have an exciting episode for you today. We're joined by a member of the Amplify team, which just launched a new service today. Um, and so we're going to be talking about that. But in the meantime, if you have any questions at all during this presentation, feel free to ask that in the chat. We have members of the service team standing by to talk more. Let's begin. René, do you want to introduce yourself before we talk about Amplify Studio?
Yeah. Hey, I'm René, and I'm a senior product manager at AWS Amplify, and my job is to make front-end developers really happy on AWS.
Awesome. So before we get into what was launched here today, I want to do some level setting, right? So talk us a little bit about the workflows that go for front-end devs when it comes to building an app. What do they have to work with? Some of the problems that they face.
Yeah, so front-end developers, they actually really focus on the user interface and the user experience, right? To just make it feel just right for the end customer. And they work very closely with designers and product owners like myself, right? But in addition to that, more often than not, they inadvertently have to do backend work. So they have to set up some backend for like storing data, dealing with like authentication, authorization, and also just hosting their web app, right? So those are all jobs that a front-end developer nowadays just tends to have to pick up for. Yeah.
I remember working on a social media application where we had that same sort of thing. We had front-end team for the mobile application, for the website, but then there was always going to be another feature where either we'd have to get the timing right. The back-end team has to develop it first, or the front-end team is like waiting on the back-end team, and there was always that question there of like, are the two features going to be released in sync?
Yeah.
Nice. And so we have Amplify right now. How does that fit into the picture for front end devs right now for what's already available, not what's been launched today?
Yeah, so to kind of summarize it in one sentence, Amplify is a front-end developer's best friend. So we help them really build, ship, and scale their apps, right? And we can tease that apart in saying that Amplify really provides you the mechanisms to build your application backend, connect to it, and then host and ship your app. And Amplify is an abstraction on top of AWS. But unlike other abstractions, Amplify not only makes it easy to get started with a backend that is really, really scalable, but also we give you many extensibility features that allows you to really scale to the full depth and breadth of AWS.
So tell me more about what those features are. I understand that there's a few pieces. There's like the Amplify UI, there's the SDK, there's Amplify hosting. So these are things that already existed, for a while now, and a lot of people are using them. What is the new thing that we just launched that is exciting for Amplify?
Yeah, so to kind of recap what's available today, there's really three elements to it, right? So there's the Amplify CLI and admin UI, which allows you to configure your application backend, right? We are very opinionated around that. So you just write a single command like Amplify add API and you get a GraphQL API, or you can visually click to gather your backend data model. Then the other piece is the Amplify libraries, which is a set of, you can think of it as the code that you ship with your app so that it connects to AWS services. And these AWS services can be generated from Amplify using the CLI and admin UI, or it can be also just provisioned as part of your as part of other means. Like I can just go to a console and create a Cognito user pool, right? And last but not least, especially for web app developers, we also have Amplify Hosting, which is a fully managed CI/CD system and hosting service that can automatically detect your build settings and really supports like React, Vue, Next.js, like all the popular frameworks, and also has many features like PR previews and stuff like that. Now, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we have this Amplify admin UI that we've launched at reInvent last year, which is this mechanism to build the application backend visually. So today, I'm actually super excited to announce that Amplify admin UI from now on will be called Amplify Studio. And with Studio, developers can build full stack web and mobile apps on AWS even faster. Studio is a visual development environment that accelerates the development of these cloud-connected apps. And it does not only help you with the configuration of your backend capabilities, but now it also allows you to create front-end UI and connect the front-end UI with that backend together. And then also another really cool thing about Studio is Studio can help teams really collaborate better with their design counterparts to really create pixel perfect UX. And we can kind of see that in a demo in a bit if we want.
That's pretty cool. So if I understand correctly, it sounds like Amplify Studio is kind of putting together the pieces that have already been existing for a while, the SDKs and the hosting and the console and the UI toolkits, and saying, okay, now in Studio, you can kind of glue these things together and build out your application faster without doing a bunch of manual work to set all this stuff up.
Yeah, I would say it's gluing things together and adding more on top of it. There's some really innovative things that we've also done that, I'm certain you'd be excited for as well.
Well, let's take a look at some of those innovative
Yeah, let's
things.
do that. Let's go to the demo.
Cool. Let me know if my screen share is up.
Yeah, will do. Looks like we're good.
Cool, awesome. So let's first kind of just recap for a second on how to create your application backend using Amplify Studio, right? So as part of my Studio interface, this is my visual hub for my Amplify app. And I can go in there and create a data model. And in here, I can visually create my data model by just clicking a few buttons and typing a few words, really. So for instance, if we're going to build like a home listings application, I can create a model called home, and the listing might have a name, square foot information, address, and so on and so forth. I can also assign different types to it as well, of course. So square foot is an integer and price might be a float, right? And then the other thing that we can do is we can just kind of keep going like this. We can add, like, for instance, a favorites list feature, right, where we would have a favorite list name and then create relationships between this favorite data model and the home data model, right? And we can do that all visually, just kind of seeing how that gets reflected. So now after setting this up, I can also apply authorization rules on it pretty simply. It's basically like just reading English, if that makes sense. So anyone authenticated can create, read, update, and delete. That doesn't seem quite right. Like anybody authenticated should only be able to read. And then we should enable owner-based authorization so that when I own the home, I get to do all the CRUD operations on top of it. And similarly for favorites, I probably only want owner-based authorization, so I'm always authenticated and every list is belonging to myself. And I can basically delete the public rule altogether because favorite list should only really apply to me. And so you can see we kind of just clicked a few buttons and we've actually got our backend database and the API set up with it. I can keep going at more and more data models. But at this point, I'm kind of ready and just can click save and deploy and it's going to do its thing.
This is amazing. Back in the day, if I was to model out a bunch of relationships like this and create authorizers, you're looking at, we could do it fast, but it's talking about lose a couple of days of work there probably, creating a bunch of data models and saying like this role is allowed to access this data model, and it's just all visual there.
Yeah.
René, can you walk us a little through that backend data model and like what's happening behind the scenes there? Are we taking advantage of any other AWS services?
Yeah. So I think on a high level, every deployment of an Amplify app actually deploys all the backend resources within the customer's account. And it's also deploying it using infrastructure as code backed by CloudFormation. So it makes it super easy for you to manage, version, and replicate your infrastructure. Now, when I use actually the data model feature that I've just demoed here, what we're doing is we're setting up a GraphQL API that's backed by Amazon DynamoDB database tables. So we're giving you right off the gate this highly scalable, production-ready backend with just a few clicks.
That's awesome because I know that, I've seen DynamoDB scale to absolutely massive size. And so I know that this API is going to be able to handle it. If I did have like 1 million users overnight, all I'd have to do is turn on that, turn on the right mode in my billing model for DynamoDB, and I'm not going to have to worry about running out of any capacity whatsoever.
Yeah. Actually, something that I would love to show you, but we don't have time today, is really how we can extend or override all these Amplify generated resources as well. We have a really neat integration with CDK, but that's maybe for another demo for another day. So I kind of just want to zoom forward a little bit and so that we don't have to wait around for a deployment to be completed. So here I've already got a data model that's kind of with the same configuration that we've looked at earlier. So we can see that we've got the favorites and homes and so on and so forth. Now, how do we get customers to actually visualize this data model, right? Because in the end, the end user experience is visual. It's usually displayed through some sort of a component experience. So today we're announcing the components capability in preview as part of Amplify Studio. When I go into the components, you'll get all the usual suspects that you should probably recognize, like buttons, input fields, and so on and so forth. So a lot of primitives that we just ship to you right out of the gate. But also we have some templates that just help you get started a little bit faster, like marketing templates here, like a hero card, and so on and so forth. And with any one of these, I can literally just copy the UI component code and start using them. So these are all of our pre-built UI components.
Do we have an ability to bring our own components in there as well?
Yeah, we do. And you might have spotted the little sync with Figma button on the top right corner. And just a little bit of history there. At the beginning of this year, we ran a survey with front-end developers. And out of the hundreds of people that we've surveyed, over 80% of them are saying that as a front-end developer, a designer is now an integral part of their team. So really, to execute on any sort of app, they need a designer. And then we've surveyed those designers, and half of them are saying that they're not really happy with the implementation of their designs. So we thought maybe we should do something about that. So what we're going to enable you to do with Amplify Studio is take designs that a designer has created in Figma, which is a very popular design tool, and translate it in pixel-perfect manner as clean React code that is human readable, right? So let's kind of take a look at that. So in my particular Figma file here, you can see we've got like a header navigation element, we've got a footer, and so on and so forth. And we can modify this like any designer would. Like, this is not some special Figma file. This is just a Figma file that I have. You can, for instance, add a new label in here called AWS On Air and stuff like that, right? I can apply any sort of edits, and I also have a home card here with my cute dog pixel. Now, I want to take this and get perfect code out of it. How do we go about that? All you have to do is share the link to your Figma file. And then you go back to Studio and click this button that says Sync with Figma. Provide your link, press Sync Now. And what we're doing now is we're scanning through the entirety of your Figma file and pick up all the different components that your designer has designed. And so you can see there's a new component detected, the pet-friendly retreat, the header navigation, and the footer information, right? I can accept all or kind of go through each one of them and choose to accept or reject them, right?
I love this. I feel like it's following that philosophy of that we have here at AWS, right? We'll take care of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, let you focus on what makes you special. I never thought I'd see it applied to front-end web development, but that's awesome, right? I can just imagine what the impact is on the front-end dev, right? The time saving alone for this must be huge. Do you have any stats on that or anything you can share with us?
Yeah, so for instance, for this particular component that we've created, it would have taken a developer to really pixel perfect, that means responsive and all that stuff, really have taken a developer over 25 minutes, and we just did it here in one, right? Or less.
That's
than
awesome. And so now, like, it looks like the design is implemented. I imagine the next step is probably to hook that data model up to the design, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we have this new configuration experience for these UI components, and I can actually open up my tree here. You'll see that these are exactly the same layers that we have from Figma. So we really understand the structure of the component. And just like any React component or any UI component I want to create, I can just actually add a property to it, right? I can call a new property home, for instance, right? And it's intelligently enough to actually know my backend data model and the different, or I can create a new property from scratch as just a scalar type. Now that I've defined this top level property, I can go and select individual elements that I want to set the value for the value for from this property. So for instance, I'm going to create a value for this pet-friendly retreat area and choose, let's say, the home's address in here. You can see it's popping up the home's address information. And similarly, I can go into the price field area. Oh, this seems weird. I can go into the price field area, set the value, and then I can also do a little bit more like lightweight syntax expression language, if that makes sense. So I can concatenate strings together like a dollar sign, and then add in the price and add in additional information like per night. You can see how that's like live rendered here. Now, the other part that is interesting with this is when we talk to designers, one of the reasons why they, in retrospect, believe that their designs aren't accurately translated is because when they design the tools, they don't have all the real life data inside of their components. So they don't actually know how their component scales with different length of text, different sizes of images, and so on and so forth, right? And in here, what we actually get the opportunity to do is to provide this experience called shuffle preview. So customers can actually shuffle through their database tables and see how their component scales with different data populating into it, right?
This is amazing. So this is actual real live data from the model.
Yeah,
and I'm seeing it right there in my design studio.
Yeah, yeah. And I can also actually do more stuff here. I didn't show that earlier, but I can also set the source value of my image component, for instance, to the image URL, and it should render here perfectly as well into this component. So it can actually also fetch data that is more rich than just text.
Yeah, this is great because so many times when I've seen these type of designs, the image aspect ratios just don't match up with what the designer is trying to accomplish inside the component. And here, if I shuffle this multiple times, I'll be able to see that and say, okay, well, maybe the component needs to change a little bit to better fit the aspect ratios of the images that our users are submitting.
Yeah, and I think that's actually exactly the case. If I shuffle through this, you can see, for instance, this one has a little bit of a weird shift, right? And what the developer can now do is actually ask the designer to go to Figma and make sure that in Figma, the resize settings are appropriate, and we'll translate that actually perfectly as well into React code.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. How do we get this now into our code? How do we sync this to our code repo?
Yeah, before we go into that, let me create a collection first out of this, just so we can kind of see how it looks like in a list, because that's a little bit more exciting, if that makes sense. So let me first create a collection out of this home, so we can kind of see how all of this looks like when we have a set of components that are fetching from like the real life database. I can choose to formulate a dynamic query of data, or I can say these specific records of data should be rendered. Does look like there's a tiny little bug here where it doesn't show the real life rendered data. Let me kind
of. Maybe you didn't save the component on the previous screen. Is that what happened?
Oh, there we go. Refresh is always your savior.
Yeah.
So at this point, I can set up this collection grid as well, and it's available and so on and so forth. Now, to your question, how do we get this into our application? Now, let me pull up my React app. Right now, it's pretty boring, as you can see, but we're going to make it much more exciting in a second. So let me first pull up just my development environment, so everything's very clear. I've got Visual Studio Code in here, which is my IDE that I'll use to create this React app. So let me now kind of show you how to download all of these components basically into your local development environment. I've got this local setup instructions, and all you have to do is copy the CLI command and go back to Visual Studio. Because I'm currently running a dev version, I'm going to add a little flag in here. It's now going to try to talk to the Studio instance. It's going to quickly ask me to authenticate that I'm really who I say I am, and we make that super simple as well. You just have to click yes, that's it, and securely transferring the tokens so that it's authenticated. And all I have to do is answer a few remaining questions to just be very, very sure on where we should generate the files in. And as I'm generating and it's fetching all the backend data, you'll see slowly things popping up in our code base here. Like for instance, we've got a models folder with like model information for our backend data model, and also we've got new components popping up that we've seen earlier in the environment. So you can see we generate these React components. They are all ES6 backed and also fully TypeScript based. So you actually get full-on typings for all of these different components that we generate for you. So you see there's flex components and so on and so forth. Now, in my React code, how I use it is I can basically start populating it by just importing the component I like for instance, the header nav, right? And just use it like any other React component. So this is like any sort of React developer would do. And there we go. We've got our header nav figured out. We can kind of keep going at this and make the home card collection, I believe is what I called it earlier. And populate that as well. And in a second, you can see all the cards are populating in. And also we can do this again with the footer. And our app is basically complete.
I love it.
This is awesome. This is almost scary fast.
Yeah.
Just go from like idea to implementation, seeing it there in the browser so quickly.
Yeah, and we support a lot of properties that you can also configure. Like there are things that a designer just will not be able to tell. Like for instance, the screen size, or that it should always be full width within the screen, right? So for instance, our footer, you can see it's kind of just right now rendered at this size, but we can actually go in here and just say the width of your component is exactly 100 VW. And you can see that now this component, just with one line of code that I would have written anyway as a React developer, has become fully responsive as well. Right.
Whoa. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah, that's basically the demo. So I really hope you've seen how we can configure our backend super quickly, connect your, sorry, my mic just had an issue. So we can connect your backend super quickly, translate designs into code, and then integrate that into your app in practically no time.
I love it. So where can viewers go to learn more about this, in order to get started with Amplify Studio?
Yeah, so to get started, just go to amplify.aws. That's the URL, super simple, amplify.aws.
All right, maybe we can get somebody to drop that link into the chat for everyone to click on, amplify.aws. This is super impressive. I really hope that a lot of people are going to be able to build out their own applications and application prototypes really quickly using this. So fantastic job.
Cool.
Thank you, René.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
All right, let me switch over and click the stop recording button. Where is it? End broadcast.